I've been brewing a lot of beer recently. 5 gallons a week it's a lot to find a home for. So I'm going to brew a half-size batch, a 2.5 gallon batch, but I'm going to use my equipment that's intended to do a full 5 gallon batch. And I'm going to test it out for brewing up a delicious English bitter. Hi, I'm Martin Keane and I'm taking the Homebrew Challenge to brew 99 beers in 99 weeks, and today I get to return to my heritage as I brew my first British beer of the challenge. British beers, things like ESB, porters, and today to kick things off, ordinary bitter. Now I do have a bit of a confession to make. I call this video Not So Ordinary Bitter, but honestly this is very much ordinary bitter. In fact, as far as the style guidelines go, this drink is the very definition of ordinary bitter. But if I'd given the beer its somewhat uninspiring real name, who the heck is going to watch and share this video? It would basically just be my mom. Hi Mum, thanks for watching. But here's the rub. When it comes to ordinary bitter, it is neither all that ordinary nor at all bitter. Bitter is the name for an English amber malty beer style, and ordinary refers to the strength. So an English bitter can be ordinary or best or extra special. That refers to how strong it is. So this beer is the least strong of the English bitters that I'm going to brew. So to address my too much beer problem, I'm going to brew a half-size batch. Now normally I brew 5 gallon batches, that's enough to fill up a keg. I'm going to do a 2.5 gallon batch this time, so a half keg. Now this means I am using much less grain, kind of comically less. There's very little here. At this point I would usually run through the amount of pounds or kilos of grain that I'm using. Honestly, that's probably not going to be a whole lot of use to you unless you're also brewing a 2.5 gallon batch as well. So I think it's time to move from the absolute to the relative. So I'm going to talk in percentages, which is to say the percentage that a given grain makes up of the total grist. And in this case, the total grist is going to get to an OG, an original gravity, of 1036. So if you want to replicate this beer, you would use the same percentage of grains in your grist as well. The actual amount that you need to use depends upon the amount that you're making, but ultimately you want to get to a gravity of 1036. All right, so what have I got? Well, my base malt is Maris Otter, and I have 86% of the grist as Maris Otter. And then for specialty malts, I have 7% of Crystal 80 and 7% of Victory Malt.
Spent days and nights right here thinking about the meaning of life and love and why my heart is beating. In the moments where I find my point of view are the moments where I think of you.
I'm going to mash for an hour at 152 Fahrenheit to get to a pre-boil gravity of 1024.
Do I even dare? I waste all of my time, so what's another day? Will we even...
Now I've tried brewing smaller batches in systems that were intended to brew much larger batch sizes before, And it's really not just as easy as splitting everything in half and being done. Now there are a few things to keep an eye on with a smaller batch in the system. These thermometers here and here are pretty much useless. They just don't actually touch the wort. As you can see, it's just a little bit too high. So I reached out to Clawhammer Supply to ask them about brewing small batches in this system, and they came back and said, actually, yeah, we brew small batches all the time. And they told me the one thing to consider is the heating element. The heating element needs to be submerged beneath the water the whole time. So I put the heating element in my kettle and put just enough water in to submerge it, and it turned out I needed just a little under 2 gallons of water to keep that heating element submerged. So that tells me the minimum amount of beer I can make. Now, 2 gallons would really be pushing it, so I'm going to say 2.5 gallons is the least amount of beer I can end up with in this system. The other thing I was considering was the hop basket. Would the hops actually be in contact with the liquid if the liquid level was so low? But I've put the hop basket in and that reaches all the way to the bottom, so that's completely submerged. The other thing was the grain basket. I wanted to make sure that when I put that grain basket in, there'd be enough water to submerge all of my grain during the mash. Now this beer is a low gravity beer, which makes it a great test for doing this because there's so little grain in here. So if I can brew a 2.5 gallon batch of ordinary bitter with its really small grist, then I can really brew a 2.5 gallon batch of pretty much anything. So I put in the recipe into Beersmith, and Beersmith told me that for a 2.5 gallon batch, I need 4.25 gallons of water. That is what I added into my kettle. Then I put my grain basket into the kettle as well. And yeah, I could see that at 4.25 gallons, the grain was going to be pretty well submerged. So that gave me the confidence then to go ahead and try this. Don't judge me, but yes, I did just use a pulley to hoist 3.5 pounds of grain out of this thing. Hey, it's convenient. Now, I mentioned that an English bitter is not really all that bitter at all. It's much more malty. But that is not to say that this style is devoid of hop character. So here's what I'm adding. Now, I'm not really sure how to address this because I'm not talking about measurements now, I'm talking about percentages, but look, here goes. I've got here East Kent Golding hops. I'm going to add these in as my bittering hop at 60 minutes. Beersmith tells me I'm going to get 22 IBUs out of these, which is what I want, and it so happens to get 22 IBUs, I'm using half an ounce. Then at 20 minutes, I'm going to add my flavour and aroma hop, which is UK Fuggle hops. And for this, I'm putting this in at 20 minutes with an IBU expectation of about 12, which again for me turns out to be half an ounce. All right, let's get these in. So the boil went well. I started with a pre-boil volume of about 4 gallons and I boiled down after an hour to about 2.8 gallons, so still safely over the heating element. And then I've been chilling this and oh my goodness, this thing chilled fast. So I got right the way down to, what am I at now, 66. That's actually slightly lower than I want to be. But I got there in 6 minutes, so having less volume to cool, it does it a lot quicker. Now for yeast, I am using here a yeast from Wyeast. It's 1318. This is London Ale 3, and unlike everything else, I actually didn't do a half measure of this. This is just my usual 1 litre starter. So let's get the wort into the fermenter and add the yeast. The beer is transferred here into this fermenter. Now there is a lot of empty headspace in this fermenter because it's intended for much bigger batches, sort of 5-6 gallon batches. But I'm not too concerned about that because during fermentation that's going to generate CO2, which should push out any oxygen up through the bubbler here. So I don't think I'm going to have too many concerns about oxygen getting into the beer. Now I have to say, I have tried brewing small batches on big systems before, and there are always little gotchas, always things that don't work quite as well because it's not designed to work that way. With this system, I have had absolutely no problems at all. It's been very smooth, and it makes me think that this is something I'm going to do a bit more going forward. God blimey, governor, golly gosh, it's the British beers, the first of the British beer stars. What's your mate, how's it going?
Chip chip chiroo.
Yeah, okay, we actually are British,
yeah.
So not the fake Mary Poppins one.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, this is the first of the British stars. This is my not so ordinary bitter. Now, how familiar are you with this style? Some commercial ones you might have heard of. Let's see, Tetley's. You ever had a Tetley's bitter?
No, I've had a Tetley's tea.
It's a little bit different to that.
Okay.
A Brains bitter. Ever had one of those? No, probably not. Okay, so I'm pretty curious to see what you think of this because I think the name puts a lot of people off this sort of style. Mm-hmm. But let's take a look first of all at what this thing looks like. It looks
very amber.
Yeah, kind of a light amber, isn't it? Sort of a golden golden amber, maybe.
Yeah, no, I see that. It's very light. Once again, with the honeycomb glass, like makes the light just pop off it.
Just makes it look good, right?
Yes,
I think this looks like
agree.
a pretty delicious beer just from looks alone. Mm-hmm. So let's see what you get with aroma for this one. It's pretty broad what you can get for aroma with this beer. You can get a bit of a hop aroma, or actually no hop aroma whatsoever, a little bit of malty aroma, a little bit of biscuit aroma. I'm not getting a huge amount, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of like across the board on that one. It's very light in all the sense.
Yes.
Of sense. Like, it's just kind of ordinary.
Or living up to its name. Okay, that's good so far. All right, let's have a taste of our ordinary bitter.
Okay.
There's a little bit of malt profile to it. There is a little bit of hop profile to it, even though I don't think we could smell.
I can smell any hops at all.
But definitely is a little bit of that sort of hoppy taste to it.
Yeah.
This is a very light beer. It's 3%.
Oh, that's not fun.
Well, it is. No. It's designed for the English pub, right? So you get into the English pub, I don't know, opening hour, 11 a.m. or something, and then you just like downing 20-ounce pints of these through the football game, and then
sounds expensive.
Yeah, but you know it's designed as a session beer, right? So you can drink a good few of these, not just from the alcohol perspective, but from the sort of the drinkability perspective. I think this beer is quite easy to drink, which really does fit well with the English pub culture.
Yeah, it's light as well. Like, it tastes pretty light. That I could have a couple of them and I'd still be able to eat dinner later.
Yes.
Especially if it's like an English pub dinner.
Or go for your curry afterwards and your kebabs or whatnot, right? Well, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And cheerio.